I'm Shannon Ireland, your host of a Healthy Push podcast. I struggled with anxiety, panic disorder, and agoraphobia for 15 years. Everything used to be hard for me. Even just driving 5 minutes from my house used to feel impossible. But now I absolutely live for travel and adventure, and I experience lots of peace and joy. I've not only reclaimed my life, but I've helped hundreds of others to do the same. Here, we stop managing anxiety and instead we create a healthy relationship with it. One where you say goodbye to the anxious thoughts, symptoms, panic attacks, and fears, and you actually live your life. Forget complicated strategies, quick fixes, or the same old hacks you've heard 100 times before. Each week, I'll bring you simple, actionable advice and honest conversations that lead to real, long-term healing. You aren't just an anxious person, my friend. There are reasons why you're struggling with anxiety, and these are things you can fix and heal from. And this is where that journey begins. Welcome. You're right where you're meant to be. Hello, and welcome back to a Healthy Push podcast. Today's episode is a conversation I just told my guests I've been wanting to have for a long time because the fear of death is something that so many people, I think, struggle with, and sometimes, most often, I think, quietly. And it often shows up as anxiety, health anxiety, or even panic attacks. And it's not always this conscious fear, right, of dying. Sometimes it's more of the constant body scanning, the what if this is something serious, or the sudden thought, right, when you're experiencing anxiety and panic of what if this is it? And I know this fear so personally. There was a time in my life where the fear of death felt just so overwhelming, intrusive, consuming, and it played a huge role in my journey with anxiety and panic. So, if just hearing the word death makes your chest tighten a little, I want you to know this. This conversation is not meant to scare you. It's meant to gently take some of the fear out of something that we rarely talk about, but often think a lot about. So today I'm joined by Julie McFadden. She's a hospice nurse and a New York Times bestselling author who spent years sitting with people at the end of their lives. And Julie brings such a calm, compassionate, and grounded perspective to death and dying and what really matters in the end. So, this is not a morbid conversation or meant to be a scary conversation. It's just an honest human one. And I truly believe it can be a comforting one, especially if the fear of death has been quietly running in the background for maybe years or months. So, Julie, you are the perfect person to have here. Welcome to a Healthy Push podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to talk about all of this.
Yeah. Oh, it's going to be so freaking good. So, people are probably already like, "What?" Like, I love this topic though. So, let's just start with for anyone who might be feeling anxious that they've hit play on this episode that we're going to talk about death. What would you want them to know or hear before we even start this conversation?
Well, the title of my book is called Nothing to Fear, which sounds so easy to say, right? Nothing to fear. It's like anyone with anxiety knows, like, could almost scoff at that. And I have anxiety and panic attacks, not around fear, but around other things. So if someone were to come at me with the thing that I panic over, it is a little, it's like hard not to be defensive. So just to hopefully loosen that grip a little bit of like defensiveness, if that's happening, or just the anxiety overall. My book is called Nothing to Fear, but there is a caveat in the beginning where I say it's not really nothing to fear. It's more normal to fear. So if you have anxiety when you hear the word death or thinking about it, congratulations. You're like a really normal human being. It's so, so normal. And I think that's the part that I try to stress is about how normal it is to fear. And there's things we can do about that. One, to decrease the fear, but also just to normalize it and give yourself a little bit of a break. Of course, it's like the ultimate thing is that, of course, you have fear around it. I mean, it's not strange.
Oh, for sure. So, I want to ask you this because I think that this is really important. You being a hospice nurse, right? You've sat with a lot of people who have been at the end of their lives. How has that changed your relationship with death? Because obviously that must be so incredibly impactful.
So I've had many what I would call like mystical events, right? When watching someone die, take their last breath, or even that process. There's part of it that it's things we can talk about that were, unexplainable, that of course has brought me comfort. But and the main thing that brings me comfort and has kind of released me, at least on a day-to-day basis, I mean, of course, fear can still come up because I'm human, but release me from the fear around death is seeing how our body truly does biologically take care of us at the end of life. For the most part, like our bodies are built to live, they're built to survive, they're built to grow, and they're built to die. We have built in mechanisms to help us remain peaceful, to take care of us at the end of life. And that's the main thing that I've seen time and time and time and time and time and time and time again when watching people die. And that has been the most comforting. It's even more comforting than, the things that I can't explain that are also, kind of mystical and comforting. But just the biology of death, truly, people don't understand it and they don't see it that often. So they make their own assumptions about what it must be like. But coming from someone who is around it all the time, sees it all the time, and does understand it, it's truly comforting to watch, as strange as that sounds, because it's comforting to see how much our body does to take care of us at the end of life.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. So, something that I can't help but think, and I think this is true for so much of our Western culture, right, is that there's such a fear surrounding death because it's something that we really don't talk about. Like, just to hear you say, it's these, like, mystical, magical, like, experiences with spending time with people at the end of their lives, and I'm sure people are like, "What?" Like, that sounds so insane, but I think we don't talk about it, like, in our culture. We shy away from it. We'll do anything to not have these conversations. So, I think personally, this is a massive reason why people are so afraid of death, but can you talk about why you think there's such a fear surrounding death for so many people?
Well, because we made such advances in our world with, like, medical advances where we have been able to keep people alive for much longer, we have so many interventions to help people live longer, which is amazing. But death has really become, like, institutionalized and it's not like a home thing anymore. Whereas before, like, in the 1800s, people were dying at home. If you got sick and there weren't really interventions to be done, which there weren't many back then, right? You weren't going to the hospital to die. You weren't even really going to the hospital if you were super sick. The doctor would come to you, the person would eventually die at home and everyone knew that they were doing that and the family would try to take care of them best they could. The wake was in the home, the funeral was in the home. People would dress their homes in like black ribbons and black bows, black wreaths, so people knew, hey, someone has died here. We are a grieving family. Can you help us? Anyone could come into the house to the wake because it was like a village thing. My whole point is that it was more in our faces. Infant mortality was huge. All of these things are not great. I'm glad that we've had these advances, but because of the advances we've had in medicine, it's turned into a thing that we don't do in the homes, that we over the years, over time, don't let children see, don't, preserve life at all costs. And I've seen that firsthand as an ICU nurse for many years. I was an ICU nurse where I was doing the opposite of what hospice nurses do, right? And in seeing that side of it, I feel like we've skewed uh, too far in the one direction of like really trying to hide it, really trying to prevent it was something that is inevitable eventually for all of us. And I think we need to swing back around where there's a little more happy medium because we've hidden it so much, because we've tucked it away so much. It's become this really taboo thing. And because of that, people have really started misunderstanding it and really struggling with it, which is understandable. I mean, even healthcare professionals, when I was an ICU nurse, I didn't know half the stuff I knew about the dying body because we're constantly trying to make it not die. So I knew all the ways to try to help it not die, even though eventually it still did. So even in healthcare, we don't we don't talk about it.
It's so interesting that you say that because, yeah, it's not just the avoidance of it, right? We really do try to hide it. And I think,
Yeah.
yeah, you think about it, and I'm just thinking in the context of my own family and like how the little ones like are so far removed from it, right? And we kind of shelter people from it. And we don't, like other cultures, right, have these sort of celebrations surrounding death and these traditions and things that they do. And for us, the majority, right? I don't want to speak for everyone, but it's like we don't have these celebrations, right? We do hide it. And I love what you're saying with this preservation. Like we're so obsessed in our culture, right? With like being well and living forever. And like if something happens, there's a fix or just there's so much to do to make yourself not become sick. Honestly really didn't think of that, but that of course would adds so much fear to the mix.
Right. And like all of those things are wonderful to an extent, right?
Mhm.
And just because I've seen it with my own eyes, being an ICU nurse, right? We take extremes, we take extreme measures to try to preserve life. And to me, death is not the worst possible outcome. Suffering is far worse. And I've seen that many, many times just to preserve life. And we're really doing our world a disservice by doing that. We really, in my opinion, we really are. It's a disservice. So much so that I was like, I can't work here. I have to do something else. I cannot keep doing this.
Yeah.
We were actually doing like bad things. I mean, no one was purposely trying to do bad things, but if you do it long enough, you see how like, okay, this is bad. We can't do this to someone. And what I mean by that is like, multiple machines for multiple months on multiple medications with no end in sight. And it's like, when do we say enough is enough? You know?
It must be so interesting for you having that experience from the ICU where you're like on the total opposite side sort of right of things. So, in your experience, I'm curious what you think of this. What do you think people are actually afraid of when they say that they're afraid of death or that they're afraid of dying?
Probably the unknown, the ultimate unknown, and leaving their family, especially if they have children, leaving their loved ones. Those are the 2 main things I hear. I do think, and I'm not a healthcare professional, but I do feel like there is a difference, and you can tell me what you think, with someone who has like general anxiety over death, like the norm, like most people, if you talk, they don't like the unknown as the ultimate unknown. And they don't want to leave their loved ones. That's a big thing, and someone who truly has like health anxiety, right? Or a true panic disorder around that. I do think those are 2 different things. I still like talking about them both because I've had people, I mean, truly hundreds of people have written to me saying that they had health anxiety, they had true death anxiety, panic attacks, like debilitating anxiety around it. And just learning about it, reading my book, watching things online, watching other hospice nurses online has really helped them. So I do know there's something about it that has helped. So that's why I'm open to talking about it. But I do think, at least from my own experience with anxiety, sometimes it doesn't make sense. Sometimes we can tell ourselves till forever and ever, it's okay. You can say all the things, but when it's true fight or flight, it doesn't necessarily have to be rational. I have a really long-winded answer just because I think it's interesting. But generally speaking, I think it's, the great unknown and leaving our loved ones.
I would agree with you too. I think what you're saying, right? Yes, anxiety is often not rational, right? And I think when you're really struggling with an anxiety disorder, a lot of the thinking isn't rational, but what you're experiencing physically is really happening, right? So, like when you're having the palpitations and the dissociation and all these things that are very real and very scary, it does sort of cause those alarms to keep going and erroneously, and then you can go down all those rabbit holes of convincing yourself, right, there's something seriously wrong with me, and like that health anxiety comes in. So yeah, I think it's interesting for me obviously with my personal past experience, but I think that debilitating anxiety that people can carry relating to death can obviously stem from so many different things, right? Like, I've worked with so many people who have experienced loss, like a parent died, or they had a near death experience, or they grew up very religious, and that left a really big scar and a really unhealthy relationship with death and fear in general. So I think there are so many different things that can like bring this fear really to light and heighten it. But I think what you're saying, right, in general, as humans, like we all have these existential moments where we're like, oh shit, like death is going to happen, right? And it is so unknown. It's the ultimate unknown. It's terrifying. I think there is that difference, but it all really stems back to that fear of the unknown, right? Like whether it's health anxiety, whether it's just the general fear, it's like I don't want something to be wrong with me. I don't want anything to happen to me. I want to be okay. I want to know that I'm going to be okay. Like I want that certainty, right?
Yeah, it's like a lack of control, right? Like, if like, like, when I think of patients who 'cause, which we can get into, like, very specific things because I do think education is, like, a huge factor, right, that to help decrease that fear. But, there's lack of control, or perceived lack of control, right? There's change. No one likes change. It's uncomfortable to talk about something scary. We don't like feeling uncomfortable. So the avoidance of like, I will just avoid feeling uncomfortable at all cost. Hence why I'm not going to talk about this because I already have such low tolerance for anything uncomfortable. Which no shade. I mean, welcome to the club. Me too. Like, I'm in therapy once a week, and death brings all of that up, right? The talk about it. Like, it brings all of those uncomfortable things up. But the key that I have seen, and all the people that I've seen dying, which is like hundreds, if not thousands over the years, right? Is that the ones that are willing to talk about it, the ones that are willing to say the truth about it, even if their truth is, I'm angry, I don't want to, I'm afraid, I'm scared. No, like, no, this is not happening. That helps somehow, right? That somehow takes the grip out of the fear. It's still there, but it takes like the grip out of you because you're like saying the truth. And the truth is whatever your truth is. Usually it's something along the lines of like, I don't want to. I'm scared. So even saying those things, whenever I have patients say that to me, I'm always like, again, the whole like congratulations, like you're so normal and you're way far ahead of even most people because most people aren't even willing to say that.
Oh, it's so true. It is this, I remember back in my experience, like I said a little bit, like I don't want to make this about me and dive into this, but like grew up super religious, had this very strong fear of death for a lot of very good reasons. And I carried that for years. And it wasn't until college that I started taking these different religious courses and spiritual courses and started to learn like there's different ways to look at death and there's different ways to look at what happens after death and there's a different way to look at having a relationship with the spiritual world. And my mind was blown just being able to explore that, to talk about death in that way, to talk about spirituality. I can't tell you how much that in and of itself relieved a ton of the fear that I had, because I think for many people, like, we do have this one track thinking, I think, that probably adds a lot to this fear, and I don't know, I'd love to hear your thoughts, is that a lot of people have these concrete beliefs of, like, this is what happens when I die, and I think that contributes so much to the fear. Like, I don't want that to happen, or I'm scared of that happening, and then they resist it so much. So, like,
Yeah.
have you seen that, experienced that in your work?
So what I've seen is faith is like, I don't know if this is the right saying, but kind of like a double-edged sword because a lot of times people who have faith in whatever, and I live in Los Angeles, right? So, like, there's all types of religions and that I've dealt with, people with all types of faith, include like from like Scientology, right? To like Christian, Muslim, Jewish, like, like kind of not more average, but like my whole point is that like I've seen a bunch of different people die with different faiths. And I will say I do feel like it seems like it helps the fear,
Mm.
but then the double-edged sword is like, but then also because of their faith, they may have really strong beliefs which create fear because like where are they going and are they sure they're going there, and honestly as a hospice nurse they're not always talking to me about that. Sometimes they're talking to our chaplain, the social worker, their family. But if you're going there visiting enough, you hear things in passing. And just through over the years, I have seen that overall, the arching idea for me is that like some form of faith or at least introspection about death and dying seems to bring some comfort and some clarity to people. But the other side of that, which I also have seen, which isn't the greatest, is that they really struggle in the sense of like even when they're unconscious, they can existentially be struggling because they're either trying to hang on or there's fear. They might not say, I'm afraid, I'm going to hell or something like that. They wouldn't I've never heard someone say that, but in the things they say, the way they act, the way they hang on, the way they seem to struggle, it seems to stem from that. But overall, I would say it seems to help.
Yeah, I think it really is that introspection, right, about death and being able to talk about it and have conversations about it. Like it always amazes me. I don't know, I lost my grandfather probably 12 years ago now. And that was like my first major loss, right, as a more adult that I could understand and I had to process it and grieve and all of that. And that was so incredibly hard. And I think because my family was not one to talk about death, right? It was just like, whoa, it was full blown in my face, right? He was in hospice. I couldn't ignore it. It was like right there in front of me. And it was really scary. Like, even though at that point I had explored a lot of things, had conversations, right? Was more, had that fear more released. But still, I don't know. I would love for you, I guess, to answer this. Like, I know many people walking into that situation feel very unequipped, unprepared. Like when you're really facing it, whether it's a family member or yourself, like feel really unequipped and like kind of blindsided. Like what how do I do this? Like can you speak to that cuz I know for myself that was so incredibly hard.
That is one of the main reasons why I started my channel, Hospice Nurse Julie, is because the things that I heard people say about experiencing their loved one's death on hospice were, it was horrible. It was so hard. They suffered. No one helped us. I didn't understand what was happening. Why didn't someone do something? Like this and I saw, wow, there's so much misunderstanding here. One, it's normal to feel unequipped and afraid because we don't talk about it. The movies show people dying and they show them in bed or in a hospital bed and they look pretty much normal. And they give some big monologue of love and peace and then close their eyes and die. And
Yeah.
that is just not how it happens ever. Okay?
Yeah.
Ever. People will always say like, "What movie's closest?" I'm like, "There are no movies. I can't think of one movie or one TV show that like gets it right at all."
Yeah.
There's some that are like kind of get it, maybe a little better, but for the most part, they don't. Because someone dying, usually if they're dying on hospice, right, which I would consider a natural death, even though they're dying from some disease, we're kind of letting the natural process take over. A lot of times it's pretty gradual, right? So your loved one's going to look different. They might not be waking up to you. Their eyes might be open, but they're not making any eye contact. Their mouth might be open. They're going to have changes in breathing. They're going to have a gurgly breath most of the time. They might have changes in skin color, depending on when you see them when they're in this dying process. We call it actively dying, which is the very last phase of life. All of those things are normal and to be expected and are happening because the body is literally taking over and knows how to die. But if you're not ready for that, you're gonna walk in and go, "Whoa, this looks awful. Can he hear me? Can he not? Are they okay? Why are they breathing like that?" And then, of course, people think they're suffocating to death, depending on when because certain breaths. So this is the part that I love, and I've actually shown real life actively dying so people know what it looks like. We all have a blood chemistry all throughout our life, which is a miracle. And the body like creates this perfect blood chemistry. So we breathe perfectly, we feel good, we feel like we can catch our breath. And if it ever gets a little off, the body will compensate. It does like amazing things. When we're dying, that blood chemistry starts metabolically changing because the body knows it's dying. And that metabolic change first off, turns the brain offline, so you're not really conscious, and changes the way you breathe. So it's a supernatural process, but if you don't know that, it's really scary. Your loved one breathes differently. They can look like they're a fish out of water breathing. Not everybody, but some people, right? So when I hear someone go, "Oh my God, it looked like my loved one suffocated to death," that cues me into they probably had changes in breathing and no one told you what the heck it looks like. And of course, you'd think that was happening. But really, it's the most natural thing ever. And it's really our body taking care of ourselves, like it's the body helping the person. So I say all these things again, maybe I'm overloading everybody, but it's the point is to help you understand what death actually looks like, what dying actually looks like. So when you see it, you're not freaking out, because this is a sacred moment, in my opinion. You get to be with someone that you love while they're taking their last breaths on earth. That is sad. That is hard, but it's also special and sacred. And it can be special and sacred if we can take the fear out of that, and I think we can take the fear out of that by educating. This is what's happening. This is why it's happening. Here's what you can do if you want to, which is usually just nothing. Sit by them and hold their hand and talk to them and just be there. There's not a lot of doing at the end of life. Again, I mean, like you can tell I can talk and talk and talk about this topic, right? But it's so misunderstood that that's where I think a lot of fear comes in.
For sure. I wish that I had had so much more understanding, and I think the hospice nurses did a great job, but I was like a grandchild, right? And so there was a lot explained to my grandmother and my mom, but like I walked in and I was just like, "Oh, what?" But having that understanding now and this I love this reassurance that you're giving, right? Because it's like consistent and should be such a knowing for all of us humans that our bodies always know how to take care of us, even through like the hardest. I always tell people this relating to anxiety and panic. Like, you have a panic attack, your body knows what to do. It is really trying to help you, but like we get in the way of it so much, right? We try to like make it stop and we try to feel better. And it's just so similar how there are so many themes like this, right? That we're constantly trying to have this resistance, and our bodies are just like, no, we're actually doing a really good job and we're taking care of you and we know what we're doing. Like, it's okay. So I think that's so reassuring. And I'm glad that you talked about that. Um, I want to ask if somebody is like really scared. I think you've given some thoughts already, some things for people to think about, but I kind of want to ask this more direct. If someone is really scared, like has this kind of consistent, maybe not daily, but it is like weekly, it is like this nagging fear of death, whether it be because they're experiencing so much anxiety or they just went through a loss and they don't want that to happen to them. Like, what's one small way that they could begin to change their relationship with death without like forcing the acceptance, right? Because I think we hear this a lot of like, well, you just have to accept it's going to happen, right? Like, we're all going to die. And it's like, oh, great. Yes. Yeah, it's like, yeah, but no, okay? Like that you
Don't know how to do that because, like, what do you even mean? Just accept it. It's like, what does that even mean?
yeah,
For anything in life. I think okay, so first, I'm not a healthcare professional, and I do feel like if this is something that's really I mean, nagging is a bad word, but I can't think of it. Something that's pretty consistent. Personally, I mean, only from my own experience of my mental health, right? I tried to do it alone for a long time, and it doesn't work for me. Like I needed medication. I needed a trained therapist to help me understand what was happening in my body, understand my thoughts, go from my head to my heart. That's a big thing for me because I can be in my head about all types of stuff. And I feel like that can be the same thing with any kind of anxiety or fear that you have. So it's like, the awareness and the acceptance, I think, goes from here to here. But how do you do that? And I think everyone will be different, but not doing it alone and doing it with somebody who is a trained professional, I think, is the number one thing I think someone should do if this is something that they are really plagued by. And then when you're with that person, the person who has like a degree to help you, then look at my videos, then read my book, then watch my video. That's because I think if you do it before then, it could make things worse. I think personally. 'cause you're not ready for it and you already have this, like, fight or flight thing going on, right?
Yeah, you're so right, and I think much like I talk to my students about all the time, like, we're working on changing your relationship with anxiety. When it comes to death, I feel like it's really working on changing your relationship with fear, and it is, like, getting that support, right? If it is something that's really consistent and feels consuming, like, it is so helpful to reach out and be like, "Okay, this is really causing me a lot of anxiety." Like, it'd be so helpful to get support. That is so incredibly helpful, and I think what you're saying, right, and I just wanna emphasize, is you often have to create safety, right, before you actually are able to talk about death, to be able to read about death, to watch videos. Like, you can't just thrust yourself into, "Okay, I'm gonna, go full force into learning about death," when I don't even feel safe in my own body. Like,
I think one little thing you could do to help yourself is to remind yourself over and over and over again that our bodies know how to die. Our bodies will take care of us. We are built to live and we are physically and chemically and biologically built to die. And that has been really comforting to me because I've watched it with my own eyes. Hundreds of people's bodies helping them do it. Like it's like a built-in support system for the most part. Like dying is not painful. Diseases you die from can cause pain and cause things to not be working as they should, but generally speaking, our bodies know how to do it, and that's the first and most fascinating thing I found when becoming a hospice nurse. So when you start having that fear, remind yourself, "Our bodies are built to die. My body will take care of me. My body will take care of me."
I love that you said that because I think especially going through the experience that I went through with losing my grandfather, I did kinda have this belief of, like, shit, it is painful because it looks painful. It looked painful, I should say, but that was because I didn't have the understanding. Like, nobody said, I think people might say, like, "He's not in pain," or "They're not in pain," but when you're seeing something in front of your eyes that doesn't look that way, it can be really hard to convince yourself, like, it's not painful. So, I'm so glad that you say that because one of the things I was gonna ask you is, like, what are things that people commonly fear about dying that you wish you could correct? 'Cause and I think that's such a big one.
Yes, oh my gosh, there's so people think dying is painful, they think, they're starving to death, they think they're laying there unable to say they're in a lot of pain, right? That's the main thing I hear. How do you know they're not in pain? They can't talk to
Yeah,
us. How do you know? So we do know. And we know one because we are trained professionals to look for nonverbal cues of pain and a dying body will show us nonverbal signs of pain. And if they are showing those nonverbal signs, we would medicate. So like those signs would be moaning, restlessness. If you touch them, they flinch. If different things that we would look for to indicate pain. Vital signs sometimes if we decide to take vital signs. That's not my favorite, but technically we could do that. A dying body is like a baby. A baby can't verbalize. I'm teething, I'm wet, I'm hungry, but you can tell by certain cries, you can tell by if they're acting fussy, what's going on, right? That is just like a dying person. They will also do that. How do I know? Experience. I've seen, so many people and when they look like they're just laying there sleeping, they likely are very comfortable. Now they might look different, like I said, they might be breathing differently, their mouth might be open, their eyes might be open, they might look a little gaunt, different coloring, and that's all the natural part of the body shutting down. So if you don't know that, you can equate that with suffering, but they're not. The eating and drinking thing, that's a way the body takes care of us. So your loved one is not dehydrated, like your loved one is not like thirsting for things or hungry because long before they're at the phase of when they're actually actively dying, their body turns off their hunger and thirst mechanism in the brain, makes them not hungry and thirsty because the body knows that the drier, meaning the more dehydrated you are, the better you actually feel. And now if you and I got, like, lost in the desert and we were, like, starving and we were healthy and we were not getting food and water, that is not that is our body will suffer a bit because we're healthy. And the body's not clicking in that we're, like, dying, right? But when you are doing this, like, slow, gradual, natural death, the body has already clicked in probably months ago, "Hey, we're starting to slow down." So we're gonna click off that hunger and thirst mechanism in us. So we're not really craving food. We're not really craving water. Now granted, if they're asking for it, by all means, yes, give them food and water. But I mean, generally speaking, they're not because they're unconscious. And I say all this to say, like, they're not laying there going, I wish I could eat and drink. Their body has already turned that off to help them.
Ugh, I love that you shared all of that. So, okay, I want to shift a little bit because I'm thinking about like some of the layers of fear because I think there is so much fear in general, but I think when you really get down to it, I know when I have conversations with clients and students, there's layers to this fear. Like there are different things that are contributing to the fear. And I think one of the biggest things is like afterlife, right? Like what happens after you die. So, can you share your perspective on this? Like, what do you think happens after we die?
Yes, I mean, I have a definite belief in an afterlife. I never try to push it on anybody because I just think it's everyone's personal journey. But what I think is, and I've thought this ever since I've been a little girl, and then as I became a hospice nurse, I feel like it's been validated. So, I've always felt like I had been missing some place. Like I felt like homesick for like a place that I can't quite remember. And even as a little girl, I would have, like, moments of, like, this feeling of, like, "Ah, there it is." Like, this thing, this feeling of, like, home. And I remember one time I'm not even religious, but we were Irish Catholic, and we'd go to church every once in a while. But I do remember, like, leaving the church, even as a little girl, and not remember anything, but remembering this feeling of, like home. This feels like home, and not church felt like home, but this feeling felt like home. And I've had those moments like that all throughout my life, okay? And then when I became a hospice nurse, watching people die and seeing people take their last breath, I have felt that same feeling. And because it's not my loved one, like the grief is removed, I can kinda almost see it objectively. It's like they're so close to this place that I've once been. Or when I see a baby being born, it's the same feeling of like this baby is so close to where I've once been. So it makes me feel like that's where I'm going. I'm going home. When I get there, it's going to feel more like home than here ever could. It's going to feel more like, "Oh my gosh, how did I ever forget this place? Of course. This is where I'm from. This is where I belong. Here." And back there, where I was cool, but no, this is where I belong. This is where I've always been and always known, and how have I forgotten this place? And that's why when I watch people die, it doesn't feel sad to me. It feels like I can feel that feeling of home, and they're so close to it. I mean, I don't wanna say jealous because that's not really what I feel, but I'm grateful that I get to, like, get that feeling again because it feels good. So that's where I think we all go, and I don't think you need to do something to get there. I don't think you need to believe something to get there. I think it's not about getting there. I think it's going back to where we've always been.
Ugh, I love that. I'm so glad that you shared that. And I think this is something really important. I think that people can explore, and it's really helpful when you explore this. And I think I heard this somewhere and I can't remember, but it really stuck with me. It was like, what feels good for you when you think of afterlife, right? When you think of what happens after we die, what do you think the potentials could be? What could the possibilities be? And what feels good for you? And I think, of course, growing up religious, that was never taught. It was, you're going to heaven, you're going to hell, but you're most likely going to hell. So it was so like helpful to hear this of what you can think and believe whatever you want and what feels good for you. And I think what you're saying, it's just so funny because I have a similar belief. And I think I have these moments sort of deja vu. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it to me, that also is like this weird connection of I was once there and I lived there. And like that is sort of home. And I'm just being reminded of that. And I think when you can connect to something like that, that feels good in your body, like it helps so much to relieve the fear of dying.
And that's the thing too, is I've never felt, even with patients who were really struggling or who kinda gave me, like, there's patients that, like, gave me the ick. Like, I've done a video about it. There's things where I've been like, "Ugh," like, "They don't feel right," or like, "Something feels off here." And personally, I don't believe in hell, so I don't believe anyone's going there, but, like, that's still I've never had an experience where which would make me believe that there is, like, a bad place. And, like, granted, I don't really know, but what I do know is the things I've experienced with my job and outside of my job with this wonderful, beautiful, peaceful feeling of love and grace and kindness, and, like, all there is love, 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 that thing didn't have an opposite. Didn't have like a, "There's this and this. If only you're" like, it just didn't it doesn't exist for me personally. Yeah, I mean, that's half the reason why, and we can get into religion if you want to, but, like, I did not grow up religious, but I was, like, born again Christian on my own as I got older, as I was turning into, like, a college student and later, and I had a whole experience with Jesus, and I love me some Jesus. I love me some Jesus. I feel like that is where I really felt like, "Holy wow, there is something divine, and, like, Jesus is beautiful and wonderful, and I love Jesus." But the more I got into the Christian church, the more I was like, "Wait, this isn't the Jesus I know." Like, the Jesus I know, the love I felt from this experience would never be like, "But you must believe in me or you're going to hell." Like, I just don't
Yeah.
believe that. I don't know if that's what this podcast is about, but that has not that was I had to eventually stop going to not all Christian churches actually believe that either, because I found Christian churches that don't believe in hell, but, I just couldn't believe that the experience I had would ever send someone to quote unquote "hell." I just
Yeah. I agree, but the whole religious thing, right, is a whole 'nother topic that, oh
Yeah,
my
it really
gosh,
is,
we
it really
could
is.
we could talk for hours about that. But I'm so interested to know this. So, of course, like you've said, you've been with many, many people at the end of their lives. What has this time spent with them taught you about really matters in the life part?
Yes, I'm writing a whole second book about this, PS. It's not coming out until 2027, my first book was about just educating about real life actively dying and what it means and how to not feel so afraid of it, right? This next book is like, what has it taught me? Because I really do, I feel so grateful because I really do live my life knowing in here, not up here, because up here can make it scary, but in here that I'm going to die. And it's not morbid. It doesn't scare me. In fact, it helps me live. It helps me feel more free because it's like I don't take it for granted on a day-to-day basis. And I was on another podcast where with Dr. Mike, and Dr. Mike was like, "Yeah, I mean, we can say that, but, like, do you really do that?" And I'm like, "I'm telling Dr. Mike, yes, like, my life has been changed by doing this work over and over and over again." It takes practice and it takes, like, kind of consistent. I can see how it'd be harder if you're not, like, faced with it all the time, but there's something about being faced with it all the time that really has helped solidify in my heart this acceptance around death and dying, and it has helped free me, which is so counterintuitive, free me to, like, live in the day, appreciate how my coffee tastes, appreciate the fact that I can, like, eat food and taste food and it tastes good. I can walk down the street. All of the things that we take for granted, it's really given me, like, a new lease on life in the day that I'm in. I will say, again, a whole 'nother podcast, but I am sober. I've been sober for almost 10 years, and I'm in a 12-step program, which also helps you live in the day, right? 24 hours at a time. So that coupled with this contemplation and this understanding that I will not be here always really has set me free to appreciate all the things I have in the day that I'm in. Now, granted, I can get back in my head and go into crazy town, but, like, generally speaking, I can get myself back. That is what it has taught me, and it really has, like, solidified this freedom in my heart about how to live.
I love that, and I think, of course, like, I'm sure people aren't thinking this, but I have to say, like, you don't need to become a hospice nurse, right? And you don't
Yes.
need to
No, you
do any
don't.
of these careers, right, to develop this healthy relationship with death, and I think you're so right, like, death teaches us how to actually live, and it's not the I don't know, I always people will say, "I'm gonna live every day to its fullest," or, "I'm gonna" and they have all these grandiose ideas, and it's like, I think it's way more simple than that, and
Yes.
just being able to, like, notice all the goodness that's happening on a day-to-day basis and, like, absorbing that, and I mean, you're gonna take moments for granted, you're gonna take days for granted, like, we all do that because 'cause we're human, but I think, yeah, so much of what you're saying, it's like, if you really allow yourself to go there, to talk about it, to understand it, to explore it, it will give you so much more freedom in life.
Yes. It's not about like, I'm gonna live life and jump out of an airplane and go travel and quit my job. I mean, if you want, that's also part of it if you
That
want it
sounds
to be.
good.
Yeah, but it's more about, like, the little things. It's like, I'm so grateful I can feel the sun on my face. I'm so grateful I have coffee right now. I'm so grateful for my warm bed. I'm so grateful for, like, the fact that I can call my mom. Not everyone listening has that, right? And I'm not trying to make you sad, but it's like remembering all the things that are important to you and how much they actually mean, how brilliant it is that, like, I have eyes that see, that
Mhm.
I have ears that hear. I truly have learned how to, like, incorporate that in my daily life, and I think you don't have to be a hospice nurse to do that. It's more of, like, doing things like this, listening to a podcast like this, and it takes practice. It takes practice, and
Yeah.
this isn't like and on top of if we're talking to people with, like, true anxiety disorders, which I feel like I have, not about death and dying, but around other things. That also takes practice and you need help and it's not as easy, if you have true panic disorder around death, it's going to take more time to get to a place where you're like, I feel free contemplating this,
Yeah.
But it is out there. I mean, I really have had people write me, 2-page long emails about how they are free from this. So it can happen.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. Well, I know now I'm so curious. I've read other books about death and dying, and so I'm going to get my hands on yours. But if people want to read that, if they feel like they're in a good, safe place to read that, where can they find your book?
You can find it anywhere you get books. Thanks to my amazing community, it's a New York Times bestseller. So when that happens, bookstores have it, and Amazon has it, or so you can get it basically anywhere. It's called Nothing to Fear. Super grateful for it. Chapter 6 is a good chapter if you want to like start with something soft and warm and fuzzy. Chapter 6 is a good one. You don't have to read it linear. You can start from the beginning if you want, but you could also just look through the book and kind of start anywhere. But yeah, so it's called Nothing to Fear by me, Julie McFadden.
I love that. And Julie, if people want to find you, connect with you, like on social, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm across all platforms as Hospice Nurse Julie. So TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, just look up Hospice Nurse Julie and you'll find me.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. It's been so great.
I hope you loved this episode of A Healthy Push. If you have, I'd be so grateful if you could leave me a rating and review wherever you're listening to this podcast. This helps people to find the show and get the support they need. And if you know someone who could use a little push, be sure to share this episode with them. And for even more support, head over to ahealthypush.com for show notes and loads of tips, tools, and inspiration to help you on your recovery journey. I'll see you next week.